Good afternoon and welcome to the Virtually Speaking Podcast, episode number 202. My name is Pete Fletcher, a.k.a. Pedro Arrow, and joining me for the first time in 2022 is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, buddy?
Feeling kind of slowly like I'm waking up, getting into this year. You know, nothing really happened over the Christmas break. It was nice. Easy, and
Real quiet, yeah.
Yeah, real quiet. You know, didn't have to do any patching or any work.
John, you know, I must say that over the holidays, the one thing I probably missed the most was all your segues. They're amazing, and and they make me happy. So with that, we will bring on the person that we want to talk to about your awesome segue, which is patching and security. While most people were out shopping and drinking, eggnog, there were a lot of folks that were actually patching, and security was a big thing. And there was the Yule log, and then there was the Log4j. And here to talk to us about the Log4j is our good friend, Mr. Bob Plankers. Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And yes, they're both, whether it's a Yule log or a Log4j component, they're both probably on fire. And so it's good to be here. It's been a while. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, it's been a while. Yeah, lots of changes at VMware, and I know you've been moving around, but everybody still knows you as sort of like the authority on security. You and Mike Foley, and you guys have done some great work, and particularly with this Log4j thing and other security vulnerabilities and patches and all that stuff. It seems like when I read about it at VMware, I always find myself on a blog that says by Bob Plankers.
Yeah, well, that happens. One of the things that I come from an IT operations background. I did a lot of incident response and so one of the things that I can bring to the table is trying to, communicate these things. And, us folks in technical marketing, that should be our thing. How do we bring complicated stuff? How do we make it accessible to people? And I can do that for security advisories too, as it turns out. So do you want to talk about Log4j?
Yeah, obviously that is the question on everybody's mind is sort of what is Log4j and why is that a big deal?
Well, so Log4j, it's not a VMware component, though I don't want to, it's kind of like, it's one of those things. There's certain things on the internet, certain software components. There's things like NTP and mail servers and all this stuff that are just invisible to most people, but absolutely crucial to the operation of internet stuff, software and that. And Log4j is one of them. Log4j, sometimes it's pronounced as Log4j. I don't know. I'm not going to get into, is it GIF or GIF? Not going to go there. But it's a holy war. But regardless, it was found to have a hole in it. Turns out it's a component. It's a Java component that scratches an itch. It's for a lot of software, a lot of Java software in the world. I mean, my home router even has Log4j in it, as it turns out, and it helps with logging. It helps writing to disk. Logging is a very important thing. The ability to see what's going on, to see what's wrong, to go back and see who logged in when, all of that stuff. It's very important to log. And so this scratches an itch and does it so successfully that it's in everything. And it was found it's got a feature that, there's two features. One is a Java feature where Java can load dynamic classes. So you can put a Java class together and it'll load it on demand, basically. And that seems interesting. I've never used it personally, but it seems like an interesting feature. Log4j has got a feature where you can ask it to do lookups on things, LDAP lookups and that. Not 100% sure what the use case is there, but the net effect is that you can ask Log4j, the Log4j component, to go out to basically query a remote and malicious LDAP server, which returns a Java class, which loads, and then that Java class can do whatever it wants, right? Because it's your code, so it can execute system calls, all that stuff, and it's a full remote compromise, and the big problem is how do you get a logging component to log something? It interprets the strings that it's logging. It is how you ask it to do this. So how do you ask it to do this? Well, you roll up on a username field that's exposed to the internet or something, and you type in this special string. You just get it to log something, and then it'll do this. And so, yeah, it's logging all the failed login attempts and all this stuff, because that's what we want. And all of a sudden, that's an attack vector. So that's really why this is nasty. And it's not. A lot of folks learned about it from VMware, but it's in everything. It's in absolutely everything. It's in a bunch of our products as well. And so, yeah,
this is starting to remind me kind of Heartbleed and like the whole OpenSSL problem of, OpenSSL was everywhere.
Exactly like Heartbleed. The scope of it, the suddenness of it, this was dropped on the world, and it's very much like Heartbleed. Heartbleed is the last big one, and so, and like I said, it's not the fault of the software maintainers or whatever. All software has bugs, except VMware software. VMware software does not have bugs, and we know that for a fact, right? No, all software's got bugs, and all needs to be patched. And there's this idea in open source that many eyes make all bugs shallow, which is true, but the eyes need to be looking at the problem as well. And so, Log4j has become. There was one initial advisory, and now there's 4 as well. And so, it's been a rough time here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, like the Heartbleed and OpenSSL, once people started looking at OpenSSL, they realized, oh God, this is this critical component that's no one's been paying enough attention to or auditing or funding.
OpenSSL, NTP, all of that stuff, Once you start
there's
an XKCD cartoon about this, where it shows a stack of software as components stacked up, and then there's this little piece right at the bottom, and it's like critical unmaintained piece of software. This software is maintained, all that sort of stuff, but it's like just highlighting that there's this stuff. No
one at the Apache Foundation is technically who owned this, right? But at the end of the day, no one had a full-time job maintaining this. There were some people who their employers asked them to look at it on the side, I guess, but this wasn't.
Well, and that's the thing. Employers, and that's the thing about open source is that it's, how did the Apache Foundation get its name? And Apache server, Apache as in people have been hacking on it, and that's how it got its name originally. That's the nature of open source. Somebody's got an itch, they come along and scratch it, and it's maybe not a complete solution, maybe not all of this stuff. There's not full security audits. It's.
Well, it seems like this one's definitely getting the attention of government. I mean, Congress is involved. There's funding. Google even donated $100 million for research. It seems like Log4j definitely, while it's a vulnerability and it makes people nervous, it seems like this might be the opportunity that was needed to sort of standardize on some of these things, because much like that cartoon that you mentioned, like this little piece, and I think that it said, all of infrastructure on top, the world's infrastructure, and then it said some guy who's been ignored or whatever, who gets paid nothing is managing this little piece.
Yeah. Well, and that's, so we're kind of at a critical point here with ransomware and all of the stuff that, there's a lot of attention on it. And CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the U.S. government, is getting involved in a lot of this stuff very directly, very pointed stuff. Because the other thing we've discovered, I've discovered on the vendor side of things, and they're figuring out, is that most people aren't security minded. Most people don't think about this stuff in these ways, and so they need guidance. Supply chains are really important, both inside of software and hardware and all of that stuff, and and so protecting those, doing good security audits on them, even knowing what components comprise a piece of software is really important as well. And it's good to see all these organizations get involved. But it's kind of like the many eyes thing that I was mentioning, and those many eyes now have resulted in 4 different CVEs. The Apache Software Foundation has released disclosed 4 vulnerabilities now in Log4j. We started with 2.15 or whatever, and now I think we're up to 2.17.1 in versions. They're getting a little bit more obscure and harder to use as an attacker might use them.
I think the last one I saw required you have local root, which, I kind of chuckled to myself.
Yeah,
and
the
was
last
like,
one is
you have local root. You are.
Yeah, the people were making fun of that one a little bit, and I get why they released it. It's it shouldn't be a security vulnerability, and they fixed it. So, but it was kind of like if you misconfigure your software to allow people to do things, then them allowing to do things is a vulnerability. But that's the way it works, and so that's so vulnerabilities are scored with CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. And it's a 0 to 10 number. The first one, CVE-2021-44228. You can tell I've been working on it a lot because I can remember the actual numbers now. That was the big one. That scored CVSS of 10. It's full remote compromise, remote code execution. RCE is what that one's called. And so you can get a system that isn't owned by you to execute code that is generated by you. That's not a good situation. Wow. And just by malicious LDAP loading the classes and that. So they released an advisory about that, and then 4 or 5 days later they revised the advisory. It was very sudden. It was a Friday morning. I want to say it was like December 9th or something like that. So we've been talking about this for almost a month now. It was a Friday morning. We all got to work, and we were already 8 hours behind the world because this was like 4 a.m. Pacific time or something like that it was disclosed. Yeah. And it was 0 day. What I mean by a 0 day vulnerability, it's a term in the InfoSec community for it's brand new. It's day 0. We're learning about it. We are learning about it all together right now, and so it was dropped on us on the 9th. I want to say it was the 9th of December, something, whatever that Friday was. Here, I can actually look.
That's got to be scary, though. If you're an administrator and it's like 0 day and you go to your company that manages your infrastructure and you're like, we're trying to figure it out ourselves. That's not a comfortable place to be.
That's the thing. So we're taken by surprise. The Oracles, the Microsoft wasn't super affected by it for obvious reasons, but all of the enterprise software companies, all of a sudden we have to stop.
iCloud had a vulnerability. I mean, you could have you could literally put something that would cause the exploit within your username login field on iCloud, and that would trigger like that. That really showed the breadth of it to me.
No, it's scary, and we're all learning about it at the same time. And people are so used to, us having our act together. All of a sudden, we're learning about it at the same time. Not that we don't have our act together, but we're starting from scratch. Normally, you don't see the first, 60 days of prep and us working it into development cycles and that. And it's not a panic. Yeah. And so the Apache Software Foundation, they did a good job with it. They released workarounds. They said, hey, we understand this is going to be a mess, and here's how to work around it. The first workarounds were just to disable the functionality by adding a flag. When you called whatever Java program had this component in it, you add a flag to it, and it removes this. Well, about 5 days later, the next Tuesday, in fact, I was at a VMUG talking when it happened. They released a new advisory about the second CVE, which is also, a compromised situation and serious, but it was a more controlled situation. But they revised the guidance for the first one for 44228, and not just to shut it off, but to go in there and unpack, jar files are basically zip files, to actually unpack it, remove that class and pack it up again and do that. And that was a pretty substantial change in direction. And so the whole industry basically had to start over again, and anybody who had implemented the old workarounds, in fact, we're finding people that implemented the first workarounds that didn't actually do the second one and are being compromised now because of it. And that's a real problem. how, and so a lot of the stuff is communications. How do we communicate with folks that they need to do this sort of thing? And these are things during any incident, I have a notebook, and and there's no difference here. I've got a notebook full of stuff that afterwards we need to work on a little bit, but the chaos just across the industry. How do we communicate to everyone who's using Log4j? Do people know they're even using Log4j? Like Apache Struts, for example, bundles it into Struts. And so you're not using Log4j, right? You're using Struts, except you are using Log4j. And so Struts, by the way, is the cause of like the big Experian hacks and things like that.
Well, the challenge I'm thinking of also is on some of these kind of issues is historically you could sometimes be like, okay, well, I don't need that port, or I don't need that service. I can block that. Like sometimes people for mitigations or workarounds would, use layer 4, but the challenge is the vCenter needs to talk to LDAP. And so it's not abnormal for a vCenter to make an LDAP call. Now, maybe it doesn't need to be making it out to the internet. So
malicious bad LDAP.mx or something like that, or bad LDAP.ru or bad LDAP.nk or whatever, like probably not not the LDAP server you want to be talking to, but and it's tough because so you can block it. There's network things for blocking it and that, but you really have to go back and you take a look at the CVE. So I had mentioned, and we've kind of been skirting around here, the 4 CVEs. The first one's the nastiest one. The other 3 are lessening things. The last 2 are basically non-default configurations. And like John, you had pointed out, the last one was if you configured the software poorly, it might be a vulnerability. And so, yeah, sure. You look at the CVSS scores, and not everything is a vulnerability. All vulnerabilities, CVSS scores are rated as the vendor sees things. That may or may not be the same way that a customer sees stuff, or an implementation sees things. Like something that is only moderate, maybe it's got a CVSS score of 6 to 8 somewhere in there. It's moderate or important to a vendor. Might actually be critical to an implementation or a customer, where a lot of the stuff depends on whether there are we like to say compensating controls, whether there's other ways of controlling access to the vulnerability. Authentication is one of them that usually plays in. Whether like a full remote code execution, if you can do it well authenticated, that's one thing. And that's that really plays into what the score is. That'll lower the score if it's only authenticated users. In this case, it can be unauthenticated users, which is why the score is so high. But you think about an environment. Attackers like to break into Active Directories. They like to break into authentication sources because it lets them into everything else, right? Yep. They're not dumb. So if an attacker has control of a user account, maybe they mailed somebody a malicious link or whatever. Humans are human. They will click on things. I've clicked on dumb things. Like I'm not proud. It's just... Yeah, we all do it. vSphere admins and virtual infrastructure admins like to think we're above it. We're not,
but it says freecandy.ru.
It says free candy, or it's something that we trust, but it's been malicious code on the back end has replaced.
Ad networks that get compromised have been a big one there. So there's a lot of drive-by.
However it happens, an attacker gets control of a user account and then uses other vulnerabilities with Active Directory or whatever to promote themselves to domain admin. And then they drop themselves into the VMware group or the firewall group or the storage group. And then guess what? They can just log in as an admin, game over. And so we, most of the incidents that we hear about are, this is how people get in. And so, this comes back to thinking about a vulnerability. When you read the vulnerability, you have to think about it in the context of your own environment. And it's really important to do that because, like I was saying, something that's rated as moderate from a vendor perspective might actually be critical if you think maybe somebody in your environment, or maybe there's an attacker that can authenticate in your environment. And so, there's a lot of environments that let everyone log into vCenter Server, for example. Why is just beyond me. I have no idea why.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
great.
do actually have a couple ideas, but they're not good ones. And so
Well,
you got to think about that. And so every environment is different, and a CVSS score is just a suggestion. So, in the case of the last two Log4j ones, we looked at it, and because it's non-default configurations, all that stuff, we don't have advisories out there for it. I think the VMSA actually notes that we looked at it, and none of our products are susceptible to those, but they are susceptible to the other ones.
So what should people be doing then? Like, what should administrators
Yeah, I noticed.
be doing?
What should we be doing here? Patching where there's a patch available, and patches are starting to come out for this. The workarounds, especially, and you should have been doing the workarounds for weeks at this point. This is what, I'm really glad this didn't happen later in December, because it really would have ruined the holiday season for a lot of folks.
Oh yeah.
Luckily, a lot of folks were able to get the workarounds in place. The workarounds are largely straightforward. Most enterprise software, VMware included, we don't usually like suggesting workarounds to people, but because they're kind of kludgy, they require logging in, but when we're all surprised by a 0 day, when this is all dropped on us, together, that was the best course of action. Do workarounds for 40 products, and so some of the things with VMware too, all of our workarounds are in knowledge base articles, KB articles. And it turns out you can subscribe to the KB articles, which I did not, I learn things every day. And I did not know that you could subscribe to a KB article. So we've been urging people to subscribe to the KB articles for that stuff. So as they got updated and then the VMSA itself gets updated when there are patches that are released, and that I think there's another one coming out very soon. So people should be monitoring that. They should subscribe to the VMSA mailing list. They should be implementing the workarounds. They should be looking for patches and applying the patches, and you folks have heard me talk about patching ad nauseum in the past. I think it's an easy way to resolve a lot of problems in environments. You can do some stuff on the network side of things, network detection and response. It's fairly easy to see some of these attacks happening. Egress controls, things like that.
Prevent your vCenter server from talking to the internet by default.
Prevent your vCenter from talking to anything that isn't part of your infrastructure that it needs to talk to, or an admin. Beyond that, people allow these. I mean,
there's the update manager function needs to talk to.
It needs to talk.
Really need to talk to vcsa.vmware.com on 443. There's a couple things external, but you can do that through a proxy. That
you could, and a lot of organizations do. Proxies add a little bit of complexity, complexity is places for attackers to hide and more things to patch, and friction and drag on your will to live and things like that. And it's not I'm not necessarily advocating for complexity, but just know what your stuff is talking to, egress firewall rules often get skipped by folks because they're just kind of a pain, and they are kind of a pain, and especially
they also lead to that. Why isn't this working? And there's an ACL we put in years ago, and you suddenly need to use that port to talk to that thing. But
and so really the big thing for people is at this point, watch for patches coming out, because this was really disruptive to our other enterprise software vendors, Oracle, all that stuff. Anything that uses Java basically had to stop and deal with this stuff. And so, being able to release a patch instantly, I keep telling people, you want us to test it, you want us to run it through the Q&A and all that's not Q&A, QA rather, but QE, whatever. You wanted to run it through our test suites and things like that. You wanted us to make sure that if we fix Log4j,
the test suites take longer than 24 hours, unfortunately.
They do, because we've got these labs full of gear. We have to run it through all the partner stuff, and it's really important that we do that. And so that's why we focused on workarounds to start with. But as patches come out, It takes a little bit. And people, I mentioned earlier, people don't see this part of it because normally there's something called coordinated disclosure or responsible disclosure. We've kind of gotten away from calling it responsible disclosure because that implies people are responsible, and
Exactly.
now it's just called coordinated disclosure, where a security researcher will often tell VMware, "Hey, we think we found a problem." And we go, okay, and we check it out and we go, okay, yeah, that's legitimately a problem. Thanks for reporting it. Then there's a clock that starts, a stopwatch. We've got about 90 days, and we can negotiate that a little bit, but the rule is basically about 90 days, and to fix it and produce patches for it, and then we can disclose it, and the security researcher discloses it at that same time, so they get credit for it, which is important. If there's bug bounties involved, and VMware's got bug bounty programs and that now for these things, and they get paid, they get credit for doing this work. They get credit in the vulnerability disclosure from VMware or whatever vendors. You'll see that often, thanks to whoever from wherever. The Log4j thing is interesting because that was reported by Alibaba, and actually in violation of Chinese law. They reported it to Apache Software Foundation directly, and so there's some news out there about that. I'm not going to get into that, but and so it will give them credit in that. But people don't really see when they see a VMSA from VMware, there's a patch associated with it, or there's about to be a patch, and it's a controlled situation. And that's what's hard about the Heartbleeds in the past. And now Log4j is that, we all learned at the same time. There was no good way of doing this. And so without tipping the hand to the attackers, and that's the thing. You got to watch the security, what you put in a security advisory, because whenever you release a security advisory, you're telling attackers, would-be attackers, that you got a problem.
They're the first ones that read it.
And there's attackers that might know about it already, and then there's a lot of attackers that don't know about it, and you don't want to tell the clueless ones as well,
right.
But we can't talk in code because we can't tell who an attacker and who a defender is out on the internet, and sometimes they're the same people, the purple hats, as it were, the red and blue, red teams, blue teams, the purple people, and so we all had to learn about this at the same time, and attackers had an advantage for a while, and they still have an advantage just because people don't patch very fast, and they're not tuned into this stuff. But, really coming back to what people should be doing, patching as patches come out, monitor for patches, subscribe to your vendor's security advisory mailing lists. VMware has one. Other vendors have them, subscribe to them. So you get it in your email, and you can see this stuff. And then, yes, the KB articles for this in particular, KB articles can be subscribed to. And so subscribe to the ones, make sure that you're running the current workarounds. If you were right on it on December 10th or whatever, that wasn't enough. You need the December 14th stuff as well.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And just kind of.
Well, you've done a good job of writing that stuff too. And so I'm going to leave links to these on the show notes, but you did an FAQ, obviously, but you also did one on what people need to know in general about, Log4j. And so there's you've written a lot of stuff. So I will leave links to those in the show notes.
Cool.
But my takeaway on this, Bob, is obviously to subscribe to the KB articles, because I did know about that from some vSAN drivers that's how I learned about it a while back. I was like, oh, it's so great that you can actually subscribe to these. But also, not only subscribe to those, but you have on the FAQs page that I have on the screen and that I will have in the show notes, there is a plethora of resources to really. It's sort of like the homepage of everything that you need to know about Log4j and all of these CVEs. So I will leave those.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The VMSA itself, the security advisory itself, is always the definitive source of what's affected and what and where the workarounds are and where the patches are. Beyond that, all the context, we've been trying for critical vulnerabilities. We've been trying to do a Q&A like this for each one of them. You've seen it through the last about a year and a half. And that's been working out really well to help people understand what's going on, understand how to protect themselves. Add links. Our Carbon Black and security folks have got a lot of great resources as well for being able to use things like NSX and IDS, IPS, and Carbon Black tools to actually detect and defend against the stuff, contain it. And that's, I've been trying to maintain links to a lot of that stuff as well. And so, but I appreciate you leaving, links there, and it comes down to, once this is over, like people really need to kind of double back and think about, kind of like my notebook here, I'm making notes of things that we could do better. And most organizations, I think, probably have an idea of what they could do better when faced with this again. And incidents are like everything else. You get good at incidents from practice. And unfortunately, that's a real negative thing. Like it sucks to be good at incident response because it means that you live through a lot of stuff. But,
exactly.
But they're infrequent for most organizations, and that's good. But you need to know when you have one, you really need to note what didn't work and what did work, and try to fix or preserve the things that worked and enhance them, and fix the things that didn't work. Notifications inside of companies, asset inventories. There's a reason that you look at like the SANS top 20 security checklist or whatever. Or I think it's not SANS anymore. I think the Center for Internet Security, CIS, has got it now. But, they've got a top 20 list of security things. And the first two are asset inventories, hardware and physical assets, and software assets. And there's a reason for that. How do you know what to patch? How did you know what to look for, or where to look for Log4j?
You probably didn't know you had Log4j, but you probably should have known you had Java running there.
Well, maybe, but if you download an appliance from the internet somewhere,
you may not know there's Java inside of it. So,
at VMware, we deliver all of our stuff as appliances. And so I try to watch what I'm saying here, because all of our stuff is appliances, but we stand behind them. Yeah. We that's our model, and that's the
at least
unit
know who
that
to go ask
in.
And who to look and.
You download something random, a random container from the internet. You have no idea what's in it. Do people actually take it apart? No, they just go, "Oh, I have Wiki now." And the and that's great, but they don't know what went into that. And I've always been a little wary of, well, even back in I'm going to date myself here, like CPAN, the Comprehensive Perl Archive Network, back in the day. The predecessors to a lot of these internet repositories of easily installable software. CPAN was even like that. How do you know that the module you're going to download isn't malicious? Well, not even malicious. How do you know it's going to work at all? And that was my problem back in the day. That's actually what kind of got me thinking a long time ago about this.
You're basically making me now view all of Docker Hub with the same level of suspicion.
It's scary.
Download links from 2cows or cnetsdownload.com.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Who knows?
Yeah. No, it's really scary. Go and look at some of the last updated times on the containers for enterprise software. You've got enterprise software companies that that are out there that have created containers and published them up to these repositories.
Yep.
And you look at the last update time, and it's like a year ago, and then go to their security page and see all of the CVSS 9+ things that have come out in there, and think to yourself, somebody's downloaded. Then you look at the download count for that container, because it didn't.
I found OpenFiler. I've been running OpenFiler for 20 years, even though it got abandoned 10 years ago. So no.
And not to throw anybody under the bus, but everybody needs to make good decisions about their own environment.
Absolutely.
And that's really what it comes down to. And people don't do that. They don't think about, who's patching this, how often does it get patched, that sort of stuff. And in a lot of cases, the stuff that you download, it's free like a puppy. You don't want it because it costs money and time moving forward. It might be free initially, but it's stuff you don't need. You can do it in other ways, or it's just the ROI is really low. And so
right. Yeah, and it's definitely going to wet the bed, just like a puppy, right?
Yeah, wet the bed. Like it's going to eat a lot. And it's just So I've got a bunch of friends with Great Danes, and so dogs that are as tall as me. I just think about them when I think like, because those puppies start really small.
They're so cute when they're puppies, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
and then your whole infrastructure depends on it, and I don't want to tear apart that analogy, but
yeah, we'll just leave it there. So,
but Bob, listen, this has been a plethora of information. I really appreciate it. We're gonna leave links to the show notes, and we will we're gonna get this up, and we appreciate your time. And as always, you're welcome on the podcast anytime, my friend. Thanks for joining us today.
I love it. Thanks for having me on, and good luck to everyone. Stay safe.
All right, well, that music tells me it's time to go. And so if you want to get in touch with us, send us an email at podcast@vmware.com. You can subscribe to us at your podcast app of choice by searching Virtually Speaking Podcast. You can catch this in all episodes at vspeakingpodcast.com. A big thanks to Mr. Bob Plankers for joining us this week. We're back next week, but until then, bye for now. Thanks, Bob.
All right, I gotta go in too. Pete, that was fun.